Time for the lions. Tell them one story. Listen to the lion voice, yeah.
Today we are going into some basic knowledge about Rastafari. You see, I'm here without my Tam today because today's topic we are going to talk about LOCS, and we're going to talk about Rastafari. Why do Rastafari wear LOCS? You know, how LOCS became to be associated with Rastafari. We're going to just touch on these basic topics. Again, YouTube is a search engine, so we want to make sure that when people search for these topics that they are hearing from Rastafari brethren and sistren. I've been growing my LOCS now over 20 years, and I give thanks, and we're going to just do a whole overview. And the number one question people ask is, do you have to be DRED to be a Rasta? Or do you have to be a DRED to be Rastafari? I would put it that way, because I on this channel, at the solution side of the internet, we do make a distinction between Rasta and Rastafari. Rasta is the culture that came popular in Jamaica. Rastafari are the adherents to the teachings and the life and the liberty of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I, and those who acknowledge His divinity wherever they may be. They may not be adherents to Rasta culture, so to speak, or what is typically conceived as Rasta culture, but they are Rastafari. So do you have to be DRED to be Rasta? Morgan Heritage have a song. Big up Gramps Morgan, brethren that I've had the pleasure to interact with on various occasions. A JMC alumni, spoke at the 2020 JMC. So big up Gramps Morgan, big up Peter. Met Peter at South by Southwest. Irie brethren. They sung that famous song, You Don't Have to Be DRED to be Rasta. And the answer is no. And we don't say this from opinion, we say this from historical fact. Because the early Rastafari did not have LOCS. When we look at ones like Leonard Percival Howell, who acknowledged as the founder, he established Pinnacle, the first Rastafari agrarian settlement in Jamaica that was displaced and destroyed by the Jamaican government. He did not have LOCS. When you talk about Dr. Claudius Henry, he did not have LOCS. You talk about the Prophet Gad, who was the founder of the 12th tribe of Israel. He did not have LOCS, and there are many brethren who profess Rastafari that do not have LOCS. I have very close brethren to this day who don't have LOCS, but they live their life as Rastafari, acknowledge the divinity of His Majesty, and you can't tell them, man, they say them on a Rastafari, and they live it. So you don't have to be DRED to be Rastafari. So these are just some things about LOCS. We can go into so much more, but I just wanted to have a basic kind of overview on LOCS and why Rastafari wear LOCS. The answer is that LOCS is a covenant unto the Most High. It is a separation. It is how we show our separation from the wider society, and that we are separating ourselves unto the Almighty to give Him the praises. So for Rastafari, LOCS have a very spiritual connotation. So this is really the core of what we're going to talk about in this episode, is that LOCS is a covenant for Rastafari. This is why Rastafari wear LOCS. For the rest of black people, it might just be a culture. It might be returning to yourself, your natural self. The black man in his natural form is a LOCS man. That is a fact. But what are we defining as LOCS? We're talking about what they would call the matted hair, or in the Western terms, we say your natural antenna. Because if you leave your hair as a black man or black woman, it's gonna lock naturally. It's what nature will call it to do. So when we talk about the origin of LOCS, we're talking about Africa. We're not talking about Jamaica. We're not talking about any other place. I've seen online them citing Greece as a potential source, India as a potential source, which, as you know, ancient India was an African civilization. You know, you're talking about the early migration, heavily melanated people coming out of the continent. You know, the Kush dynasty, Hindu Kush of India. So when you're talking about ancient India, of course, you would have LOCS anywhere there were black people in ancient civilizations, because let's get it correct, LOCS came before people started to trim and go to the barber. So ancient man was a Nati Congo man. That's just a reality. When you're surviving, they didn't have that time to manicure and do the hair like that. So where did LOCS originate? This is a question many have asked. When you look online, you see them say Greece, you see them say potentially India, some sources say Kemet, but the answer is obvious. LOCS originated with the origins of humanity, which is Africa, because mankind, Homo sapien in his natural state, is a LOCS man. If you let your hair grow as a black person, your hair is going to lock naturally. So when we look at the origin of LOCS, of course we have to say the origin of LOCS is Africa. That being said, there are examples of LOCS you can find in Kemet. The mummies that have been excavated, some of them have LOCS upon their head. It's depicted in some of the hieroglyphic art in Kemet. So you can see that. There's another evidence of LOCS from an African text. Which text am I talking about? I'm talking about the Bible. When you read the Bible, you can see from the Nazarite vow to the high priest Samuel, to Samson, to different prophets, you can see this tradition of LOCS being a separation. We can see it in the modern sense in the Orthodox Church via the Bahatawi. So I always say, when we look at biblical history, Ethiopia is the time capsule. And when we look at Ethiopia, you have a order of monks called the Bahatawi that grow their LOCS, that roam the hills, that are like the mystic men of the Orthodox Church. They don't belong to any particular church. They walk and they preach. And these men are LOCS man. And this, again, all of these things that we're talking about predate the manifestation of LOCS in Jamaica. This is before Leonard Howell, Archibald Dunkley, Joseph Hibbert, the early founding fathers of the Rastafari movement, came and spread the sound in Jamaica, causing the uprising. In the Western world, LOCS are associated with Rastafari for a reason, because when these elders came and professed and bust the seal about His Majesty, it opened up that third eye and returned man to himself. It's like you're waking up from a dream and you realize that you're in a state of bondage, and now you have that yearning to be free. So when we talk about within Rastafari, the revolution in Jamaica with LOCS, from the elders, we hear about the ancient son of thunder, Ras Tafari, aka Bongowato, and the youth Black Faith. And this was, an order that would later become the Nyabingi order, where these youths, were moving amongst the other ones. Our elder, big up Ras Iris, tell us about the comb sums. So the brethren them who comb them here, brethren them who had their wear the hair like His Majesty in an afro, bearded man. There were different early iterations of Rastafari, but the youth now came up and they started becoming militant. And then they were reading scripture, and then they come across the Nazarite vow, which is the separation unto the Almighty.
Numbers 6, King James Version. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when either man or woman shall separate themselves to vow a vow of Nazarite, to separate themselves unto the Lord. He shall separate himself from wine and strong drink, and shall drink no vinegar of wine, or vinegar of strong drink, neither shall he drink any liquor of grapes, nor eat moist grapes, or dried. All the days of his separation shall he eat nothing that is made of the vine tree, from the kernels even to the husk. All the days of the vow of his separation there shall no razor come upon his head until the days be fulfilled, in the which he separateth himself unto the Lord. He shall be holy, and shall let the locks of the hair of his head grow.
But at the same time that they're looking at the Nazarite, the papers in Jamaica, this is early 50s, you know. The papers in Jamaica are talking about the Mau Mau revolution. So they're getting images of Deda and Kamati and some of the warriors from the Mau Mau revolution with their locks there. So they're putting two and two together. And we have to big up the Mau Mau, because the Mau Mau also again an example of locks. Before they were prominent in Jamaica, the Maasai warriors wore locks as well in Kenya. So there are many African traditions. Again, this is the natural state. We look at locks as being extreme, but really, if you check it, the extreme is the barbarism, where you're constantly cutting your hair, because everyone naturally have their locks. So
got no money, I'm short on cash, plus a little bit I got to make it last. Some driving in the fast lane, drive too fast, and when they crash, none for them crack like glass. Some act like they never had no past. I ask them about the history, them grin and laugh. They don't know what we've been through, see what they into. I say I'm African, no, they say they're Africans too. Well, who built the OAU? When I ask them for them now, they can't say who. How many stay true and seek that light? How many sell them soul for the money and hype? It's funny how money make a man delight. The same money turn around and make him lose his life. But who gonna teach the people them how to survive? But we not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna make sure that the black man rise? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna take the dogs and open their eyes? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna shine his light, reveal all lies? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Some ain't got money, they lost their job. Some ain't got money, so they steal and rob. Some work hard just to get the car and the house, get laid off, creditors are kicked out. Some sell rocks to the people for the love of the money. Some start doing evil. Some push dope in their veins. Who lost our hope? Some break the chains. Tell them about the lion who can't be tamed. Rule Mount Zion crowned with a new name. Might of the Trinity manifest in the flesh. Now the energy can't be contained. Who gonna teach the people them how to survive? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna make sure that the black people rise? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna take the stripper, open the eyes? We not the lion from Judah tribe. Who gonna shine his light, reveal all lies? We not the lion from Judah tribe.